Hello everyone, thank you for joining us today on our discussion regarding alarms, alerts and other notifications. Max Solutions are the creators of the Process View Alarm Management Suite, which according to a recent ARC study is the most popular independent alarm management software used in the power generation market. We offer services and training in all aspects of alarm management, and we're based in the UK. My name is James Fox, having worked for IMAC, Matricon and Honeywell in the alarm management arena over the last 20 years, holding roles in technical support, site engineering, training and sales. I'm now the product manager for the Process View Suite. Joining me on this webinar is Ian Brown. Ian Brown is our alarm rationalization and services manager. With 40 years experience in the process industries, Ian has held a variety of technical, maintenance, management and consultancy roles, specifically focusing on alarm management for the past 14 years. Ian's expertise covers IEC 62682, ISA 18.2 and EMEA 191, and is also trained as a TÜV certified functional safety engineer. With that, I'd now like to hand you over to Ian, who will take us through the presentation. If you have any questions, you can key them into the interface on your screen or wait until the end where we'll have a short Q&A session. Over to you, Ian.
Okay, thank you, James. Thanks for that. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining this webinar, which today is about alarms, alerts, and other notifications. So we're going to talk about what are alerts and other notifications. I'm going to focus less on alarms and how should we deal with them. Okay, opening thought, alarms, we're not alone. Cue science fiction music. So alarms aren't the only things we have to deal with. There are also other notification types. I've already mentioned in the title of this webinar, alerts, for example. So there are other notification types and designations which exist. So this is what I'm going to look at today. What are they and what should you do with them? So in ISA 18.2, there are some technical reports which I'll mention very shortly. Some of these notification types and designations are mentioned in Technical Report 8, which accompanies the ISA 18.2 standard. Some are discussed in Technical Report 4, which also accompanies the 18.2 standard. The types of notification that you will know and possibly are aware of are prompt, which we should know, they've been around a long time. Alerts, which have been around for a few years, they were introduced in the standards. I'm mentioning here operator alert, slight change to alert. Notice is another designation which is being talked about, but not widely publicized yet. And status, indication. Again, something that's noted and mentioned. So what are all these things? And let's not forget, apart from notifications, good old events. In good old days, we had alarms and events. That was it. Don't forget events. Some systems may call them journal notifications or entries, but don't forget those. So what are the differences between these types of what I'm going to call notifications and, of course, how should we deal with them? Is there any hard and fast rule that we can apply to dealing with all these things? So let's start thinking about what we can do. So the first question is, where can you find any help about notifications? Well, if we look in the standards, ISA 18.2, 2016, there was a 2009, the initial version, and IEC 62682. If we look in them, do we have anything? What about the EMEA guidelines, which is currently at revision 3, edition 3? Okay, well, they're limited value. There's very little in there other than the brief mentions of some of the notification types, because these documents, these standards and the guidelines, they focus on alarms. How do you deal with alarms? Anything that's not an alarm, they don't really consider those things. those types of notification. So they're not much help if you're looking to find out how to deal with other types of notification. As I mentioned just on the previous slide, accompanying ISA 18.2, there are a number of technical reports. Okay, I think there were originally 6. There are now up to 8. TR8, Technical Report 8, accompanying the 18.2 standard, is about alerts and other notifications, the topic for our webinar today. I've highlighted TR4 and TR6 in slightly bolder text from the other technical reports because TR4 and 6, they have references to some of the notification types. So we'll briefly mention those as we go through. But what we must remember is that these technical reports are informative. They're not normative. The standards say this is what you shall do. These technical reports are more of a how-to guidance. These are things you could do and ways in which you can use these different types of notifications, or whatever the technical report is about. For example, TR1 tells you how you can create an alarm philosophy. Okay, so there's some information in the technical reports, and TR8, which I will focus on today, is specifically about alerts and other notifications. So before we start, we'll just have a look and see what we mean by some of these things. Okay, what do we really mean by an event? If we look in a dictionary, we'll find the definition is anything that happens, especially something important or unusual. So for example, this webinar today is something that's happening, and of course it's important. Hopefully it's not too unusual, but it's something that happens. It's a thing that happens. So that's what an event is. If we look in the standards, an event is defined as the representation of a solicited or unsolicited fact indicating a state change. So something is happening. Something changes, whether it goes on or off, goes higher, goes lower. A mode is changed from auto to manual, whatever. That's what an event is called. So events are not alarms. So these are things that happen which are not alarms. As I've stated, they're not discussed in the standards and guidelines because they focus on the alarms. And in actual fact, in the standards, event data and analysis techniques are specifically excluded. So we're not going to talk about the things that we call an event, which is not an alarm. Okay, so events, not alarms, they're often recorded in an electronic log, but not enunciated to the operator. So some of these things that happen, you may want to record, but not let the operator know. And as I've recently referred to on the slide 1, some systems may refer to an event as a journal entry. And of course, good old days, alarms and events only, the OPC standard provides an OPC alarm and event specification. So alarms, things that we want people to know about. Events are things we just want to record. So events, are they useful? Yes. If you have an incident or you want to look back through something, then events can be used to make sure that things did happen that are normally expected to happen. So you don't want an operator to be told that a valve has closed because it should have closed. You want them to know if it's failed. So events, they're useful, and you should have those things. You may, for example, in your alarm philosophy, when you put an override or an inhibitor on a safety system, if the operator has applied that as part of a permit to work, does he need an alarm to tell him that he's just applied an inhibit? Because alarms shouldn't be as a result of an operator action. The operator's acted. Why does he need an alarm to tell him what he's just done? Maybe your alarm philosophy allows that, maybe it doesn't. Okay, so we have events, things that are happening. So some things that have happened. We're talking about notifications. What do I mean by a notification? Okay, a notification is a transmission concerning an event, a thing that has happened, to a recipient resulting in awareness. This is a definition in Technical Report 8, one of those technical reports I referred to that accompany the ISA 18.2 standard. Okay, on your plant, there will be tens, hundreds, thousands of different events, things that happen that your control system can identify. It can detect. So it may be an analog input, a variation of a high or a low variable. It could be something turned on or off. Things could come by Modbus, by serial link. Lots and lots of things can happen. So if you have tens, hundreds, thousands of things happening on your plant every day, the question you need to ask is, when something happens, does someone need to know about it? So, for example, as I mentioned in events just previously, a valve closure. It's a normal thing to happen. The valve has been asked to close. Do I need anybody to know about it? Excuse me. No, not really, because it's expected. So when an event, something that happens, when it occurs, does anyone need to know about it? That's the question you need to know. If yes, someone needs to know, then we need to generate a notification. The question is, what kind of notification? Are we going to generate an alarm? Or are we going to generate something else? That's the question you need to be asking yourself, the second question. So briefly, I'm going to just touch on alarms. Everybody here should know all about alarms anyway. But what is an alarm? It's a warning of danger, a loud noise, a flashing light, something to bring your attention to something that's happening. In the standards, it's an audible or visible means of indicating to the operator something that's gone wrong, something that the operator has to do something about. So we should all know that, and I'm not going to take a great deal of time about alarms, but an alarm is a notification. And when we look at alarms, what do we consider? Priority, alarm response, all these kind of things. We're going to look at the cause, the potential cause of the alarm, potential consequence if we miss the alarm. All those good things, we're going to think about alarms. So this is what we will be defined in the standards. What about routing as well? A lot of systems will allow you to route alarms to different recipients. So that's something to think about when you're considering your alarms. Do you want operator A on plant A to receive operator B on plant B's alarms? No. So alarms for plant B should be routed to operator B. Alarms to plant A should be routed to operator A. Perhaps you may even route some alarms to maintenance people. There may be a maintenance screen. So these are the kind of things which we already know, we should already know about alarms. So I'm not going to dwell on alarms any further. Other than alarms, we want to generate some kind of notification. So what do we actually have potentially? Okay, the standards already mention alert. And if we look in the 2009, the initial edition of ISA 18.2, the definition is on the screen. An audible and visible means letting the operator know that something requires awareness. You need to know about this. An alert in 2009 definition is something that is indicated separately from alarm indications and doesn't meet the criteria for an alarm. Okay. In IEC 6.62682, audible and visible means same top line that can require evaluation when time allows. Okay, so if you have time to deal with this, it's not an alarm and it's somewhere else. A prompt. Prompts are fairly well known, certainly if you work on batch systems. A prompt is a notification to an operator that requires something to be done which is part of normal operation, but the control system can't actually carry out that action. So we'll talk about prompts a little bit later on. There's now a thing in Technical Report 8, which is in the draft stage as we currently speak, a thing called notice. So It's a notification which doesn't require a timely response and doesn't meet the criteria to be an alarm, alert, or a prompt. So if it's not an alarm, it's not an alert, it's not a prompt, it could be a notice. Now, this is currently in draft at the moment, so we'll talk about it a little bit later on. And reference is made in Technical Report 8 to a status indication. Now, this is not considered to be a notification, as in making people aware of things. This is just simply a status indication on a screen that the operators can go to the compressor screen and see if the main pump is still running or whatever they're going to look at. They might want to go and look at that. It's not something that's going to be brought to their attention. So this is not really a notification, but it is some of the terminology that may come into practice that you may need to be aware of. Okay, so there are some notifications and terminology on the screen there. So let's have a look at some of the things that they're going to mean. On the screen here is a table taken from the draft version of Technical Report 8. I've made alarm red because we're not going to talk about that. So we've talked on the previous slide about alerts, prompts, and notices. But if you notice in this table, we now have alert and operator alert. Okay, so things are starting to diverge. We're getting more notification types. Okay, let's just consider these notification types one at a time. I'm going to start with what I think, for me, excuse me, is the easiest, the prompt. It's been around a long time. If you work specifically on, especially on batch plants, you will know about prompts. It's a request from the control system for the operator to do something that the control system can't do. Typically in batch processes, asking the operator, telling them what their next action has to be. I worked on a batch plant. I was the maintenance manager and control system engineer for 10 years. We used prompts. We had, for example, minor ingredients that we added to a reactor. The minor ingredient might be 1.6 grams of a particular product, a particular initiator. We would charge 600 kilos of monomer. Great, easy for the control system to do. But when we have 5 minor ingredients of 1.6 grams, 2.3 grams, 5.8 grams, 10 liters, we would have needed around about 80 to 90 addition systems for every reactor because we had 80 to 90 individual products. The control system couldn't do that, so it prompted the operator to go and do this. And of course, at the start of the recipe, they would confirm that all the parameters were correct as per the written make sheet. So these are things the operating system can't do, your control system can't do. They're normal things, they're expected events. They're expected to happen. You know they're going to happen. Just one thing, closing a prompt is slightly different to acknowledging an alarm, because if you close a prompt, it indicates that you've taken an action. Please go and add these minor ingredients, click OK when you've done it. So when you close a prompt, that says the action has been completed. When you acknowledge an alarm, you're simply saying you've seen it. You aren't necessarily at that point taking action or have taken action. So closing a prompt is slightly different to acknowledging an alarm. And if we look at EMEA guidelines, it should be a separate mechanism for drawing the operator's attention compared to alarms, should be displayed separately from alarms. On the batch plant I was on, we had a little box at the bottom right-hand side of the screen, which there was an orange square appeared when a particular reactor had a prompt waiting. It didn't flash in the operator's face, although we did actually have a separate sound, so the operators could identify prompts from alarms. So, but you need to keep things separate. However, how you do that, how you display these prompts, how you keep them separate, whether you use different sound, whatever, there's no help in the standards. And surprisingly, there's actually no help on this is what you should do or how to do it in Technical Report 8, which deals with batch and discrete processes. There's no rules or guidelines on what to do. Prompts are mentioned, and that's it. So basically, you need to do them how you think they best fit with your system, but keep them separate from alarms. Then we come to alerts, which is raised in the standards. An alert is an audible and visible means of indicating to the operator, again, same thing, but in 2016 version of edition 2 of ISA 18.2, the statement about indicated separately from alarms has been removed, and it now says it indicates to the operator something that requires awareness, which doesn't meet the criteria for an alarm. So the definition is slightly changed. So we have in ISA 18.2 a definition, the first 2 lines there. We then, in clause 9.8 of the standard, there's a statement: rejected alarms can be candidates for other forms of notifications, e.g. alerts. So we have alert mentioned now as a definition, the first 2 lines on the screen, and if it's an alarm and we reject it, it could be an alert. And you know, that's it. There's nothing else about alerts in the standard. The focus is on alarms. It doesn't deal with other types of notifications. Hence Working Group 8. How do we deal with these other notification types? Working Group 8 has been set up. Working Group 8, which deals with TR8, is a multi-standard group trying to harmonize definitions across different standards, because different standards may say an alert is this, and you have another standard, another technical report, the definition should be the same. So Working Group 8 is working to try and harmonize all these different definitions across the standards. And in fact, I've recently been accepted as a member of the ISA 18.2 committee, and will be starting to attend the Working Group 8. So I will hopefully be helping to shape the way of notifications to come. Okay, so with an alert, the problem is, the definition is basically, if it's not an alarm, it's an alert, which sounds great. But when you're doing rationalization, if it's not an alarm, it's an alert, or we get rid of it. Okay, so do we all of a sudden, we don't want to lose it altogether because there's no mention of events, we just want to record it, it's either an alarm or an alert. So are we all of a sudden becoming alert overloaded because the things that aren't alarms, valve close, does that become an alert? So just be careful with this definition. It's not really a great definition. So in ISA 18.2 and 6.62682, there should be consideration to redefine the alert definition. And perhaps this is going to come through Working Group 8 because it's a bit vague. So if you are going to use alerts on your plant, in your facility, you should really take the time to create a better definition of exactly what an alert is. What is it? Because it's not just good enough to say it's not an alarm, because anything that's not an alarm, it could be every other event that happens. So just be careful with that and make sure you define your alerts correctly. If we look in the 191 guidelines, alert is used to attract the attention of an operator to changes that may require assessment or action when time allows. It might, don't worry about it, nothing's going to happen if you miss it. It also then, to reinforce what I've just said, goes on to say each user's management document should specify when an event, a thing that happens, if you remember our initial definition, something that happens ceases to be an alarm because the operator does not need to do anything, or there's no consequential loss. So there's nothing the operator can do, nothing's going to happen if he doesn't do this, so that this thing that has happened, this event, is not an alarm, but we don't want it to be just logged and kept in an electronic log that nobody sees. We want someone to be made aware of it. So that's where an alert comes in, and you need to decide exactly where that break point is between it's an alarm, someone needs to do something, it's an alert, we need them to know about it, but it's not that important, but more important than just recording it. So this is where what I just said on the previous slide, you need to think about your definition of an alert. EMEA 191 goes on to say alerts should never be safety related. And that makes sense. So there's something positive. You don't want an alert, which is something that you could do if you have the time, if you can be bothered. If you had something where harm to people was going to occur, if you miss this particular notification, then you don't want it to be something like an alert, which, if you have time, do something or not, it doesn't matter. So that makes sense that they should never be safety related. You don't want harm to people, harm to the environment because somebody didn't bother to look at their alerts. Maybe configured by operators, okay, potentially as pre-alarms. Okay, maybe your system will allow you, your control system hardware allows operators to make changes to configuration, but your policies and procedures don't. So they may be configured hardware-wise with your access via as an operator, but we say, no, you're not allowed to. So it's possible that your system won't allow an operator's login to make changes to alerts. So hardware, access, policies and procedures, perhaps the operator can configure them. Alerts, like prompts that we've just seen, should be displayed differently and separately from alarms. Okay, so something common there to prompts. I've got a statement on the screen here. Ensure your system is capable of handling alerts if required. Now that probably seems a bit of a stupid statement to make, but I did some work with a customer between October last year and February this year before all the coronavirus nonsense began. I hope everyone's okay and everyone you know is okay. I was asked during that work to take the output of some rationalization that had been carried out by a person that worked for that company and had since left. Could you take the rationalization output and help us put it into a format for import into our control system? And one of the things I noticed was there were a lot of alerts in this rationalization output. If we go back a couple of slides, something is not an alarm, could be an alert. Okay, we don't want it to be just nothing, so let's make it an alert. The person that had carried out the rationalization and then since left the company had created all these alerts during the rationalization review sessions. The system that this was meant to go back into was not capable of handling alerts. So the company then had to take those alerts and re-review the reviewed alarms and decide whether they were low priority alarms, events, or nothing at all. So they had to go back and do some other work. So when you're thinking about alerts, just make sure that your system is capable of handling them. That may seem a stupid thing to say, but alert was actually in the philosophy because some of the systems within the group could handle alerts. So alert was defined in alarm philosophy, so this person had used them, but the system wasn't capable of doing them. And don't confuse alerts with low priority alarms. An alert is not an alarm, therefore it cannot be a low priority alarm, because an alarm is something that the operator must do something about when it's brought to his attention. An alert, you don't have to do something, nothing's going to happen. So don't confuse those things. Some people do. Now, in TRA, Technical Report 8, being worked on by Working Group 8, of course, alert, that's mentioned. But alert is defined within TR8, it's currently in draft, of course, as alerts for roles other than operators. So if you're not an operator, you can receive an alert. If you are an operator, they're suggesting these should be defined as operator alerts. So now we have two types of alert. Okay, so we need to think, much the same as we did with alarms, about routing. Do our alerts go to our operators, to our maintenance people, or somewhere else? So alerts are getting a little bit more complicated. Okay, notice is something that is mentioned in Technical Report 8, which, as I've said, is currently in draft. And it is a notification which does not require a timely response. So will notice become another type or designation of notification? We'll see by the end of when TR8 is published. What it really says is everything else that does not meet the criteria to be alarms, prompts, or alerts, or indeed operator alerts. So anything not meeting the criteria is an alert. If it's not an alarm, it's an alert, according to the standards. But now, if it's not an alarm or an alert or a prompt or an operator alert, it could be a notice. This is really vague. It's not a great definition. So what is a notice? It tells you it's not these things, but it doesn't really define what it is. Much the same as alert tells you it's not an alarm, but doesn't really define what an alert is. So this is not really a great thing. So it goes on to say that notices must be significant enough that they deserve to be transmitted, to be sent to someone to make them aware, and the kind of things that people may be aware of or may need to be aware of. Okay, these are the sorts of people that you may send notices to. Plant managers, site managers, control system engineers. They may receive a notice that's not an alarm or an alert or a prompt, but something they need to know about. So it's quite vague, and currently within the working group 8, I know one of the other guys in the group, and potentially notice is not going to be part of the final publication. It's there at the moment. It may stay, it may not. So there may be something that you will have to deal with as a notice. Okay, so we've got a number of notification types: alarm, alert, notice, prompt. How do you determine what you need to do? Well, within TR8, Technical Report 8, there's a decision tree. Great, fantastic. So at the top of that decision tree, we have an event, something that's happened, something that's happening. First question I asked, early slide, do we need someone to be aware of this? Do we need to notify, tell someone that this thing has happened? Yes. Okay. Is it an operator or not an operator? You then go down the tree, whether it's abnormal, normal condition. And at the bottom, you come down to whether you want an operator alert, an alarm, an operator prompt. There's a prompt. So potentially we have prompt and operator prompt going to different people now. Whether it's an alert, potentially a notice. But there is a methodology of deciding whether the notification type you want is there and which one should you choose. One thing that I think is missing, excuse me 1 second, just a little bit of a dry throat there. One thing that I think is missing is the leg at the right hand side that I've just highlighted in green. When something happens, what's not talked about in the standards and anything else, the working groups, although there is a paragraph later on in TR8 regarding events, journal entries, there's nothing that says we don't need to notify someone, but we would like to record this. So no one needs to be aware of it, but going forward, if we need to look back, we need to see these things have happened. And I think it would be useful to actually add that leg. Does the event need recording? It doesn't need to be notified, but we would like to record it electronically. Let's put it in an electronic journal. I think that would be useful to add, and it's something I will bring up when I join the next meeting for Working Group 8. So we have a decision tree. That's great. So we can decide which type of event which type of notification, I beg your pardon, we're going to choose for the event that has happened. However, in TR8, we go on further to say a single thing that happened, a single event, can generate multiple notifications to different people. And these notifications, they don't have to be the same type of notification. And there's actually an example in TR8 in the technical report. At the top, the event in the box at the top is a smart instrument. It's predicting that it's likely to fail at some point, but no sooner than 8 weeks in the future. So it's going to be a little while in the future, but it's likely to happen. Okay, if you follow that tree down, there are 4 branches off the tree. An alarm, the left-hand one. It's not an alarm. It's just saying, well, it's possibly going to go wrong. So you don't want an alarm to your operator or anyone else. An alert. It's generating an alert to the engineering reliability people. Okay, maybe you need to go and have a look at this. It may send a notice, for example, to the engineering equipment group, it says there, that decided on purchases. They define the types of equipment that we're going to buy on our plant. This is the type of flow meter. This is the type of pressure transmitter we're going to use. They might want to know if failures are happening or potentially going to happen, because they might want to change the type of equipment they're buying. So they might want a notice as opposed to an alert. A prompt at the right-hand side is saying, well, there's no action that anyone has to carry out, so there's no prompt. So a single event, a thing that happens from our original definition, something that happens, may generate multiple types of notifications and be routed to multiple people. Okay, are there any other considerations for notifications? We've got to decide what notification type. Okay, who's going to receive these things? In Technical Report 8, which, as I say, is currently in draft, there are things called predetermined notifications. So this is not the individual thing that happens, but the example they give is a quality improvement group may receive predetermined alert notifications when statistical limits of a product key parameter is exceeded. So it's not just the single event, the thing that's happened, I've gone out of spec. It's, oh, we've had 10 of those out of 100 go out of spec. So this is not the actual event itself, but it's a calculation. So there may be predetermined notifications. It then goes on in TR8 to suggest things such as on-demand notifications. And the example given there is the facility manager may send out a notification to plant personnel. The South Road is flooded. Please use the North Road. So this is something that someone can type in and send out as a notification. This is no longer things that are events that are happening on your plant that are detected by your control system. This is something that someone is entering, just the same as the predetermined notifications. They're not something that's happened, that one event. It's something as a result of a calculation. So on-demand notifications, if you take it to its logical conclusion, could be a plant manager sends out, it's Barry's birthday today. Please wish him a happy birthday. He could send that notification to everyone. It's something that can be generated by anyone at any time. So there are other types of notifications. So help! How do we determine, how do we design a notification system? So we have alarms, they're easy. We have standards to deal with those. But what about everything else? How do we implement that? Okay, ISA 18.2, it's only focused on alarms. There's no help there. And that's the same can be said of IEC 62682 and any other standard. They only focus on alarms. So no help there. ISA 18.2, Technical Report 8, the technical report that I'm talking about. It focuses on non-alarm notifications. It's not an alarm, so the criteria for alarms don't apply. You don't have to rationalize these alerts. There's no consequence, so you don't have to prioritize them. Okay, but don't forget, this is guidance on things you can use, alerts, notices, whatever other type of notification you designate. This is informative. It's not normative. You don't have to. It's not you shall. It's simply guidelines. It's helpful guidelines on what you can do, but it doesn't tell you what you should do. So what TR8 goes on to suggest is you can choose a notification strategy that best fits with your plant, with your network. Can your notification system, can it access the control system network, your business network? Or do you have routers and switches in the way that prevent firewalls, that prevent things from contacting each other? So all of a sudden, you've got to consider all these other networks, because when Barry's birthday is announced by the plant manager, that's likely to be on your business network, your plant network, not your control network. So will that appear for the operator? Can it get to the operator? Okay. So a notification system is going to be a lot more complicated than your basic control system alarm system, where it's an alarm, I enunciate it to the operator. So when you're putting in, you're considering all your notifications that you're going to use, you have to consider where all these notifications are coming from. For example, people, it's Barry's birthday. The South Road is closed, use the North Road, whatever. What about handheld devices? In the batch plant I worked in, for example, we would have big boxes of product that were generated, ton boxes. There might be a barcode on the side that tells you exactly what that product is, the batch number, etc. The warehouse operative might go to there with a handheld device, scan the barcode, and click, that's the one I want. He knows that's the bit he wants to pick. That could potentially send a notification to the scheduler to say, I'm using box number 10. We only have 9 boxes left. You need to reschedule things. The operator doesn't need to know about that, but the scheduler does. So think about, you may be integrating your notification system with manufacturing, other manufacturing systems. Warehousing systems. So just think about where all these things are going to come from, these notifications. Using alarms is easy, but once you start trying to define other types of notification, it becomes so much more difficult. Consider what you're going to actually generate. Okay, you're going to want to say what the event is, what the thing is that you want people to be made aware of. Use the South Road instead of the North Road. I'm probably getting those mixed up, but that's by the by. You need to have that information, so that needs to be part of what you generate. Okay, do you want to generate the time and date? Do you want that to people to know when it was generated? So what are you going to transmit to people? Are you going to tell them it's Barry's birthday and this was done on the 13th at 11:07:36? Do they need to know that? Where are these messages going to be routed? How are they going to get to all these various people? Are you actually going to store all these notification types? We're no longer talking about just alarms. We're talking about all sorts of other notifications. Are you going to store these? How are they going to be viewed? Will they be sent out by email? Will they go to people's portable devices, tablets, mobile phones, PDAs? Will they appear on dashboards, on screens around the plant? Will they appear on intranet web pages? So all of a sudden your notifications, if you're going to move away from simply alarms and use notifications, think about it. It's quite a complex topic. You're probably going to need to use some form of third-party application which integrates with your alarm system, because you may want to take things from your alarm system. It's not an alarm, I don't need to deal with it. That's dealt with on my control system, but a valve closed. this kind of thing, a statistical deviation. All of a sudden, these are going to be dealt with in a third-party package potentially. So what you really need to do before you think of considering, let's use other types of notification, you should really create a strategy document on how notifications are going to work. What types of notification are they? When is a notification, i.e., if it's an alert, if it's a notice, if it's whatever type of designation you come up with, you have to have a good definition, because people are going to use these things. And as I mentioned earlier, this person who carried out rationalization, the definition of alert was in the alarm philosophy. And he said, well, these aren't alarms. We have alerts. We'll make them an alert. He used this completely inappropriately. So make sure you define exactly in your notification strategy. So take the good practices that are relevant to alarms. An alarm is, an alarm shall be. Take these and put them in some kind of notification strategy that works alongside and merges with your alarm philosophy and your HMI philosophy, colors, sounds, etc. The kind of things, they should all mesh together. So you need to create a notification strategy before you start thinking about how you're going to use an alert because you've seen alert defined. So think carefully. What do you need? What do you want? Do you really require this? What benefit will an alert bring to your plant? Is it beneficial? Is it just something that's used because it's noted in a standard? So you can define it loosely and vaguely and then say, well, we can use them now. Do you really need them? And if you're going to use notifications, just make sure you define them properly, because the notification definitions currently are, well, this is what it isn't, but there's nothing there that says really, really definitely this is what it is. And that's the point that I drew out of the AMUA guidelines, if you remember, that in your documentation, you need to define exactly when an alarm becomes not an alarm, but it's more important than just recording it or not doing anything with it at all. So think carefully about what you want in terms of notifications. Make sure you create some kind of notification strategy that meshes with your alarm philosophy. Don't simply include an alert in your alarm philosophy because you can, because you'll end up in a big mess unless you really think about it carefully. Think about when TR8 comes out, there may be a split between alerts and operator alerts. There may be notice, there may not be a notice type of notification. Potentially not going to be there. Maybe it'll morph into something different, a different type of notification. And don't forget events. Events, recording things that happen that you don't need people to know about immediately, but are useful for post-incident analysis. Don't forget about them. Just make sure you have a definition of what you're going to record in your philosophies. So basic information, make sure each notification type is kept separate and distinguishable, certainly from alarms and certainly from each other. You don't want to mix in alerts with prompts. A prompt is something the operator needs to do. You don't want to have his prompt screen filled up with notifications which are alerts, because an alert he doesn't need to do something about. So if he has a screen full of alerts and prompts, he may miss his prompt. So keep those separate. Have some other type of method of displaying and bringing to the operator's attention, make him aware that this thing that's happened, this event has happened. Keep those things separate, and that's what you need to have in your notification strategy alongside your alarm philosophy. So make sure you don't overload people with notifications. I don't want to know everybody's birthday. I would like to know that the South Road's closed. I don't want to get drowned. So just think about what you're going to do. Think about whether you really need these things at all. And certainly in terms of alarm management, excuse me, think carefully about, I have my alarms, my priority 1, 2s and 3s, perhaps a priority 0 for critical alarms. I have my alarms. Do I really need alerts? Do I really need some other form of notification? And how am I going to deal with them? Think very, very carefully. Don't simply put them in your philosophy because they exist. Think really carefully about whether you need them or not. Okay, I haven't been able to give you hard and fast rules and guidelines on how you must do these things because the definitions currently say, well, they're not these things. So I hope, although I haven't been able to give you hard and fast rules, I hope this has been informative. There's lots of stuff out there. You need to think really, really carefully about how you use these things. My details and Mac Solution details are on the screen in front of you. If anyone has any questions, I'm going to hand over to James now. I hope this has been useful and informative to you. So, James, do we have any questions, sir?
Okay, thanks, Ian. Definitely some useful information there. And as you say, we'll now open up the presentation for a few questions. If you do have any questions, either raise your hand and I'll unmute you, or you can key them into the interface and we'll answer them. So we'll just take a moment for any questions. Okay, it doesn't look like there's any questions. So all it remains is for me to say thank you all for attending. We'll be in touch with details of our next webinar. In the meantime, we'll get this one uploaded to YouTube so you can watch it from there. And if you have any further questions or wish to get in touch regarding improvements to your alarm systems, then please do get in touch. And from myself and Ian, thank you and goodbye.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.